We always see Rome as an empire built on courage, honor, and discipline, but the truth is not really like that. Rome's real power did not come from swords, but from money, because keeping huge armies together, feeding thousands of soldiers, feeding horses, building roads, producing weapons, all of these were serious expenses. So how did Rome manage to stand strong despite such long-lasting wars? Here is where things get interesting. As Rome grew, wars got longer and bigger. Over time, the military system made up of ordinary citizens collapsed. It was no longer possible to take a farmer to war for a year and then send him back to his field. That is why the state began to pay salaries to soldiers in its professional army. Even if it was a small amount, it ensured the soldiers' loyalty to Rome. Then Rome realized something important. Conquest was actually a great source of income. New land equals new taxes, new captives equals new labor, new mines equals new money, new villages equals new tribute. So war itself became a source of income for new wars, allowing Rome to finance its army. This was not a vicious cycle, it was a money machine. But Rome wasn't only collecting taxes. In major wars, especially during the Punic Wars against Carthage, Rome borrowed huge amounts of money from very wealthy families. And these people weren't giving money just to help. They were investing. In return, they received interest, privileges, trade rights, tax collection permissions, and various other financial benefits. This turned war over time into a complete business model. As long as it was profitable, wars could not be stopped. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Over time, power shifted into the hands of generals. A general who won a war brought in money, and the one who brought money also gained political power. The logistics of war began to be handled by private companies, and they accumulated huge wealth from it. In other words, Rome had turned into an economy built on war. But this system had one flaw. It collapsed the moment it stopped. After all, if there was no war, there was no income either. When conquest slowed down, income slowed down with them. But what about soldiers' salaries, debts, payments to investors? All of those continued nonstop. So what did Rome do? They started decreasing the silver content in their coins. In other words, they tried to cover the deficit by printing money, what we call today inflation. As the currency lost its value, ordinary people suffered, but the rich got even richer. The state began collecting more taxes. Public services started to fall apart. This was not just a military collapse. The foundation of the economy was rotten, and that inevitably led to a downfall. Now let's look at today's system. Massive government debts, central banks printing money, wars financed by borrowing, defense companies growing, the rich benefiting from assets, the poor suffering from inflation. Sound very familiar, right? All of these resemble exactly the order Rome established. The only difference, today everything is digital. Rome teaches us this. A system forced to grow and expand constantly will eventually reach a point where it cannot grow anymore. And that is when the state stops squeezing the outside and starts squeezing the inside, its own citizens. History is actually like a warning sign. Economics is not only made of numbers, but of power relations. That is why being aware matters. You cannot completely escape the system, but at least you understand how the game is played. You begin to see who wins, who lends money, who pays the price. When you see a crisis, a war, or an opportunity, don't just stay busy watching the news, follow the money. Because money never lies. And history shows this. An empire collapses not because of its enemies, but when its accounts begin to fall apart. If you enjoyed these kinds of historical finance documentaries, subscribe.